The sheriff told her to step back before he even closed his door. "Ma'am, step back. I'm running the parcel." She didn't move. She squared her shoulders at the causeway gate like she owned gravity. "He owns nothing. This is common area," she said, chin high. "He's trespassing. That's my island," I said. "My grandfather's 1952 deed says so. So do the county tax rolls I've paid for the last 31 years. 15 seconds. And the scene was set. One sheriff, one HOA president. One strip of chain link stretched across the causeway like a zipper holding a lie together. Behind it, 23 new cabins sat on my island with bright orange stop-work dreams I'd make real later. Beside it, a section of broken pilings bobbed in the chop where my dock used to be. I didn't raise my voice. "Engineers don't fix things by yelling." "Sergeant," I said, "you got the APN?" He tipped his hat without looking at me. "We'll sort it." He walked back to the cruiser, leaned into the MDT, and started typing parcel numbers in the rhythm I learned sitting on the other side of desks like his. The younger deputy stood with his hand resting on his belt, the way rookies do when they're deciding how much of a scene this is going to be. The HOA president, Karen Hensley, polo with a little lakeside logo over the heart like she'd bought her authority in a pro shop, turned and gave me the smile she probably used on contractors and board members who needed to be told what to think. "Mr. Rains, we've been over this. The island is designated common area. It's in our Phase 3 plat, approved last October." "Approved where?" I asked. She tapped the logo on her shirt with the end of her pen. "At the county, permits, soil reports, environmental impact." She pursed her lips like she'd said words that should end things, and the rest of us were too stubborn to understand. "Of course you filed something," I said. "You didn't file it with the state. That's where transfers get real." The sergeant came back, face careful. "Mrs. Hensley, the MDT's showing Lawson Island as a separate parcel held in fee simple in Mr. Rain's name. Taxes paid current. I'm also seeing a note about a pending ownership flag." "That's impossible," she snapped. "We have plats." He glanced at the chain link, then at me. "Jack, what do you have?" I didn't reach for my wallet. I reached for the manila tube I'd brought because I expected to have to do this in a ditch. I handed him 3 things. A certified copy of the 1952 warranty deed from the county recorder's office with a raised seal and the familiar looping hand of a clerk who's been stamping paper longer than some board members. "Have been living here." A parcel map printout with my island shaded solid and a little line labelled Causeway Crossing to her side of the world, and a stack of tax receipts, 31 stubs, April after April, with my check numbers and the tiny graphite shadow of my thumb on more than a few. He took them like a man who knows what a certified copy is and the weight it carries in a fight. "You didn't have your deed," Karen said, pouncing. "You said you lost it." "I said I couldn't find the original at home," I said. "So I went to the recorder and got a certified copy. That's where the originals live when people are smart. Truth is, the morning after they rolled a bulldozer across my island and popped the first plank of my dock like a knuckle, I drove to the county seat before the recorder's window opened. When it did, I stood there like a teenager getting his first license and asked for what I should have had in a frame over my desk long ago. 1952. Deed from James Rains Sr. to James Rains, I told Sue, who's been at that counter longer than I've been an adult. "Now you're getting sensible, Jack," she'd said, rolling her stool back to the copy machine the way a surgeon reaches for a scalpel. She slid the heavy paper to me with that flat clerk look that says, "Don't be a stranger." I added a parcel map and tax roll printouts while I was there because I was building a wall that didn't fall when someone pushed on it. Back at the causeway, Karen saw the seal and didn't care. She waved at the cabins like a weather presenter. "We're increasing property values. We're finishing construction. You're one person, Mr. Rains, and this is a community." Behind her, a foreman revved an excavator to make a point. The blade lifted and dropped with the kind of confidence you buy with a loan. My dock was already gone. They'd taken it the morning before without a note, without a knock, just noise. A bucket scooping 60 years of memory into the lake, like my wife's laugh had never lived at the end of those boards. Clear the shoreline, she told the operator, loud enough for me to hear standing on my side with a coffee that went cold while my chest went hot. He'd hesitated. She'd looked at him and given that smile, the one used on men who need paychecks and don't want trouble. He'd cleared it. The next hour, they'd stretched chain link across the causeway and hung a shiny private access, Maple Shores. Residents-only sign in brushed aluminum no one from here would ever order. The same day, a man with a shiny badge you buy at a uniform shop taped a warning to my door. Trespass notice for trying to step onto my own island. A bill followed, $200 for verbal harassment of contractors at the exact time I'd been shouting while a machine ate the dock where Helen and I used to sit with our feet in the water and a pad of graph paper in my lap because I never learned how not to be an engineer. Dajant Hale flipped my tax roll to the last page, looked at my check number, and handed it all back like it was hot. Okay, he said, to the air more than to either of us. This is civil. It's going to court. Karen squared on him. We don't need court. We have permits. He looked back at the cruiser. You have permits for work on the mainland, he said, careful. What you don't have is the right to act like a private gate on a man's parcel gives you title. She turned her chin toward me, like she was going to win by not blinking. You're going to lose, Mr. Rains. You're out of your depth. I thought about the chain link, about the excavator operator who lowered his eyes rather than look at me when the bucket bit, about 2 chairs next to a fire ring, a man with a polyester. Badge had labelled encroaching personal effects. I thought about the empty notch on the shore, where my heel used to hang while Helen and I counted the ripples. I thought about the only thing that stops men with budgets from leaning on men without them. Sergeant, I said, you're going to get a lot of calls. In an hour, I'm going to record a lis pendens against this parcel and file for a temporary restraining order to block occupancy and marketing. You'll be able to tell anyone who asks that the court will sort this quicker than whoever signed off on that aluminum hardware. He wrestled a ghost of a smile. Don't file it in crayon. I brought a pen, I said. He tipped his hat and walked back to the cruiser. The younger deputy stayed where he was, a hand on his belt that now looked more like a measure than a show. I didn't give Karen the courtesy of a parting shot. I turned and walked the shore on my side back to my truck. The neighbours watched me like people in a waiting room, hoping the thing you have isn't contagious. One of them, George, put his hand on the chain link and said, I'm sorry, Jack. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lower it either. His boys stood behind him looking like kids who know quiet when a father tells them to be. I drove to the recorder again and slid the lice pendants across too. Sue, you're not wasting time, she said. I don't have any left, I said. She stamped it with a sound that always feels older than government, the kind that marks lines men stop pretending not to see. That'll freeze things, she said. Loans, sales, the parts of a story people usually pay attention to. I walked 3 floors up and filed my TRO papers with a clerk who looked at the causeway on a phone, video, and whispered yikes under her breath while she checked my notice service list. I signed in blue ink because judges like to see the difference between the copy and the thing that will change mornings for people who thought noise leadership would beat paper leadership. By 2, the recorder's index showed my lis pendens in the chain for anyone with a screen and sense to read. By 3, my phone started filling up with numbers I didn't recognize. Lenders, a title company counsel wanting a copy for our files, a realtor who talked fast like speed could outrun filings. I let them all hit voicemail. I went home and ate a sandwich over the sink, like a man 20 years younger and more tired than that. I stood at the edge of my shore and looked at my island like it was a friend behind glass, Somewhere over there, a man in a hard hat checked a list and thought he'd be sleeping tonight. Somewhere over here, a man in a field jacket read a stamped line in an index and decided he was going to sleep too. A truck stopped at my mailbox and rolled. The same uniformed man stepped out with a new piece of paper. He taped another warning to my door with the corner of his mouth tight, and this time he looked at me with something like embarrassment. "Just doing my job," he said. "So am I said. He left quicker than he came. I pulled the notice down, folded it once, put it under a magnet next to Helen's recipe card for cornbread she never measured quite the same way twice, and sat at the kitchen table. The light off the lake is different when you're mad. It doesn't hit you the same. It goes past the window and sits on the floor like a square you have to step around. I wrote one sentence on a yellow pad. Start where paper lives. I put the pen down and walked down to my shoreline. Across the water, a kid in a new cabin window pressed his face to the glass and watched me stand on dirt older than his parents. In a few days, his house would have a sticker that meant more than his mother's mortgage. I didn't like that. I didn't hate it. I made space on the shelf in my head where I keep complicated truths. Those cabins were fixtures on my land. Fixtures are facts. You don't argue with facts. You arrange them. Behind me, a car pulled up, and my daughter's little compact coughed to a stop. Dana walked down the slope like a child who used to splash here, and a parent who had learned big voices didn't fix small problems. "Dad," she said, hands jammed into the pocket of a fleece that saw her through 3 different winters. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done at the start," I said. I went to the recorder. I filed. "We'll let the judge talk next." "You can't win a fight with paper against people with money," she said. And it wasn't her voice. It was the friend she had in the HOA who probably said rule like a prayer. "That's the only way to win it," I said. "With paper, not theirs. The real kind." She looked at the chain link, looked at the cabins, looked at me, and the little pad of yellow showing through the screen where I'd propped the door with my toe like a man letting smoke out of a kitchen. "I don't want them taking your house," she said. Not tough for once. "They won't," I said. "They'll take mine if I don't do this. They already took your mother's dock. I'm done letting them take things." She didn't argue. She didn't agree either. She stood with me a while and watched the water go where it wanted. That night, the HOA sent a blast email about frivolous filings by an individual resistant to progress. They called my lis pendens slander of title, which is what people who don't understand Ellis pendens call things they can't sell through. The subject line was all caps. The body had bullet points. The signature had 3 names and a logo. In the morning, the recorder's index still had my stamp. The docket had my TRO application on for a judge I knew had once told a road commissioner that the burden of proof is miles and minutes, not tone. I made coffee strong enough to laugh at different weather, pulled my field jacket on, and stepped into a day that didn't care about me, but would move if I pushed it right. The chain link held. The cabin sat quiet. The excavator operator drank from a thermos and didn't look toward my shore because he'd been told not to. The sergeant drove by and didn't stop because he'd taught himself to stay out of civil cases that were turning into real ones, and he was about to have a lot of phone calls to not answer. If you freeze a lake hard enough, people learn to walk different. That's what a lis pendens is. It makes folks step different because beneath them is something they don't understand and can't control, and if they pretend otherwise, they get wet. TROs do the same thing to landlords who write emails late at night. I watched the first gulls of the day pivot into the wind and pick an invisible line across the island we were going to draw in a courthouse. I was tempted to think about the hearing we'd get and the question I knew would come. "Do you have the original?" But I didn't. I thought about the chain link and the deed and the tax roll and the stamp and the fact that you either show people the thing that matters or you don't. And I had it. In a folder, with a seal, that went thunk when you set it on a Desk the way a word ends when a man means it. I walked back up to the house and picked up the phone to call the friend I'd served with who now worked for a state agency that cares about water and fills and the way shorelines aren't suggestions. I filled him in. He said words I'd been waiting to hear since the bulldozer first put its teeth into my dock. Send me the file, then file your TRO. We'll see you on the causeway with clipboards. I hung up, looked at the magnet holding that cheap trespass notice to my door, while Helen's cornbread recipe smiled at me from under it like a woman who forgave me for being an idiot in most ways that mattered, and picked up the folder with the recorder's stamp on it. That's where paper lives. Next stop, the motion window. I filed one page that froze their money. Here's what one stamp did in 24 hours. At 10:11 a.m., Sue slid the list pendants back across the counter with that thump only a recorder's desk can make. By noon, the county index showed my notice under the island parcel. Before 2, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree with numbers I didn't recognize and one I did. High Plains title, the voice said, trying for casual. We're seeing a notice of pendency on Lawson Island. Can you clarify? I already did, I said. At the recorder's window, 2 lenders left. Voicemails about temporary funding, suspensions pending title clearance. A realtor emailed to ask if I would be reasonable. The excavator foreman texted me a single word, really, because he knew the sound of money freezing even if he'd never heard the Latin for it. If you've never seen a list pendens work, it's not loud. It doesn't need to be. Banks and underwriters are allergic to fights. You stamp the notice, and suddenly the parts of a story people pretend are facts, closings, draws, refis, turn into questions. Before I left the courthouse, I walked 3 floors up and slid a temporary restraining order packet to the civil clerk. My affidavit was simple. Certified 1952 deed attached, parcel map attached, 31 years of tax receipts attached, photos showing demolition of my dock and chain link across the causeway attached. I wasn't asking the judge to decide ownership yet. I was asking for the one thing a court can give without a trial, time. Which judge? I asked. She glanced at the rota. Patterson for ex parte, she said. He hates games. Good. By 4, Patterson had initialed a short order that did exactly what it needed to. Maintained the status quo we should have had all along. No occupancy, no rentals, no advertising, no further site disturbance on the island. No gate or barricade across the causeway that interferes with lawful inspection by government personnel. A hearing set for 10 days. HOA to show cause why it should be otherwise. He wrote it in a tight hand like a man who doesn't like wasting ink. I took 2 certified copies to the sheriff's civil window and 1 to the county attorney's office. The deputy at civil read the order, nodded once and said, "We serve tonight." I thought that might buy me a weekend of quiet. It bought me 20 minutes. Karen's reply wasn't a person. It was a PDF, subject line in all caps, defamatory filing, slander of title, blasted to Maple Shores community. It had bullet points, bolded phrases, progress, improvement, bitter individuals, and the phrase lis pendens spelled 2 different ways in the same paragraph. It promised immediate legal action. It pierced itself on what it didn't have. Any word about my deed. A truck pulled up in front of my place at dusk. 2 deputies got out. One with the TRO, one with a stack of cease and desists for folks who thought aluminum signs create law. They crossed the causeway without asking permission because the court said they didn't need it. I watched from my shore as the younger one explained the order to the guard with the store-bought badge and the clipboard. The guard looked at the paper like it had teeth. By morning, the orange stickers were on the doors, not from the sheriff, but from people who sign with clipboards that matter even more in this kind of fight. I'd called a friend the day before, an engineer I served with who now worked at our state's Department of Natural Resources. I sent him the photos of the causeway fill, the excavator tracks, the shoreline scrape where my dock used to be, and the septic trenches laid too close to open water. He didn't say yikes. He said, title or not, if causeway fill went in without a permit across public water, that's us and the Corps. The next morning 3 trucks rolled slow across the chain-link shadows. DNR enforcement in green, County Environmental Health in white, and a dull grey rig with a US Army Corps of Engineers plate that made more people swallow than any badge I'd ever seen. They spread out with clipboards and tapes and a meter I hadn't seen since I stopped getting my boots muddy for other men's dams. DNR flagged the causeway fill under the state shoreland rules. The corpsman stood on the riprap and said, Section 404 of the Clean Water Act and Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbours Act apply. You don't dump fill or build structures in navigable waters without our say-so. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. County Environmental tagged the unpermitted septic lines inside the setback and the trenching that ran too near a wetland fringe. They were professional about it. They didn't take sides. They took notes. Then they pulled orange stopwork stickers from clipboards and pressed 1 to each cabin door, 30 seconds per door, steady, like men putting down truth. Karen tried to make it a confrontation. She came across the causeway fast, hair sharp, voice sharper. You can't just... she started. A DNR agent held up a hand without looking at her. Ma'am, we're here on state authority, he said. We'll talk to council. I stood on my side and watched 23 orange squares bloom like some weird metal fruit. The excavator operator put his hard hat down and sat on his bucket like a man who knows he's about to be told to find another job for a while. If you're wondering what the HOA's updated plat did in the face of those stickers, the answer is less than the paper it was printed on. Half of this mess lived not in a courtroom, but in a registry. In this state, if you expand a subdivision or adjust a boundary, you don't just draw lines on a county map. You record a plat with the State Survey and Platting Office. It gets a registration number. It lives forever in an index that doesn't care about logos on polos. The updated plat their lawyer loved to wave had a county file stamp and glossy pages. What it didn't have was a state registration number, because it had never made the trip from the local counter to the state registry, which is where paper turns into law. I drove to the State Survey and Platting Office 2 days after DNR, and the Corps peeled their stickers backing. It's not fancy, just a low building with shelves of tubes and a counter manned by a woman who doesn't need you to know her name to do her job. Maple Shores. Phase 3, I said. She typed, waited, and turned the monitor so I could see the line that mattered. No record found. She printed a certification, a paragraph with my parcel description, and a blank space where a registration number should have lived. It had a seal that looked like it was cut on a lathe in 1953 and kept sharp on purpose. I slid that certification into the same folder as my deed. People like Karen love binders full of paper that look important at 15 feet. Judges like single sheets with seals. The money people started calling again, and this time the calls sounded different. The construction lender wanted a path to cure for title defects and regulatory holds. The Title Insurers Coverage Council requested mediation to avoid reputational harm. A management company rep emailed about temporary dues adjustments, which is HOA for we're going to try a special assessment and hope no one reads the order. They also tried the lowest effort thing in the bag, a trespass fine pasted to my door for interfering with community access. I peeled it off and stuck it under the same magnet, holding Helen's cornbread recipe to the fridge. It looked good there, cheap next to what a real hand looked like on paper. The sheriff served Patterson's TRO on the HOA formally that afternoon. He sent me a text because he knows I sleep better when I know a thing is done. Serve complete. Tro on file. Hearing date confirmed, it said. He doesn't like punctuation, he likes facts. The TRO hearing was 10 days out. That's not long in courthouse time. It's a lifetime when you have a whole machine built on the idea that no one will shove a stick between its gears. In those 10 days, 3 things happened that mattered. First, the HOA tried to keep advertising cabins anyway. They posted glossy shots on a vacation site with language that made my wife's voice go cold in my head. Pristine private island cabins. I sent a copy of the listing to Patterson's clerk with a note. Tro violation, continued marketing. A minute later, Karen got an order from Chambers in language anyone can understand. Cease advertising, comply or show cause. Second, the management company floated a progress update to owners that said the magic words special, assessment, legal defense and temporary. People who had nodded at meetings started reading their mortgage statements and asking questions they should have asked at the ribbon cutting. Third, the bank funding the cabin's finish work sent a letter to the HOA's project account. Funding suspended pending resolution of title and regulatory matters referenced herein. That letter had a number on it you could use as a crowbar. Wire instructions crossed. Out in a calm hand. If you freeze water hard enough, the people who learn to walk across it like it was a floor remember the lake. If you freeze money hard enough, people who learn to spend other people's money remember paper. Everybody calms down, or gets louder and burns what's left of their credibility. Karen got louder. She gave an interview to the local paper. The reporter asked about the orange stickers. She said, harassment. He asked about the state plat number. She said technicality. He asked if she had held a vote before committing the HOA to Phase 3. She said words that sounded like answers until you wrote them down and saw the holes. None of that mattered as much as the thing that no HOA can argue with, iron. My friend Earl, the retired county surveyor, met me at his kitchen table with a fresh cup of percolator coffee and a spiral notebook he'd used on jobs that built the backbone of this county. He ran a finger along a line he'd drawn in 1956 and said, Old Man Hemlock was a stickler, 3/4 rebar, 5 feet down, driven into the island's corners. Paper can lie, Earl, I said, repeating something he once told me when I was too young to know what that felt like. People can lie. 100 pounds of iron in granite doesn't, he said. He flipped the notebook to a page with pencil numbers that meant more than most lawyers' paragraphs. Here are the coordinates. Tell your surveyor he can call me if he doesn't trust my memory. He'll trust it after an hour. I hired a young vet we both knew from the VFW. Kid ran a survey firm with equipment that talks to satellites and software that overlays core and USGS topo like a map maker's dream. I didn't tell him about the fight. I gave him a job. Run a boundary survey per the 1952 legal. Verify with these original coordinates. Cross with USGS. 2 weeks later, a courier handed me a heavy envelope with a raised seal that felt like a handshake you could count on. The map inside was plain to the point of arrogance. A thick black line around my island. And inside it, the footprints of 23 cabins plotted in red, measured to the inch. A lot of fights feel like fog. This one didn't anymore. It felt like steel. I folded the map and slid it under the certified deed in the folder that had started with one stamp at Sue's window. I put the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk, under the stack of letters that keep men like me sane when they think about walking into a room where other men will point microphones at them. The hearing was still days away. The sticker adhesive on those cabin doors was still new. The chain link on the causeway still hummed when the wind hit it just right. The bank's letter was still fresh enough to look wet. The DNR and the Corps had promised a joint site visit with more clipboards and fewer smiles. I stood on my side and looked at iron I couldn't see. The one thing no HOA can argue with. Iron, Survey crews don't talk like lawyers. They talk in feet and hundredths and whether the rod's on hard or soft. You can tell how a day's going by the tone of the magnetometer and the way a man's boot sole feels through the probe. They showed up just after sunup. A young vet named Miles I knew from the VFW, his rodman, and a kid running a controller that talks to satellites. They unloaded a Leica rover, a total station, a magnetic locator older than the kid, and a beat-up sledge with a handle polished by 100 jobs. "You bring the old numbers?" Miles asked. I handed him the photocopy from Earl's Spiral, the 1950s coordinate notes, and Hemlock's 3-4-inch rebar arrows corners, driven 5 feet. He whistled low. "Hemlock didn't miss," he said. We stepped onto the causeway like men walking a line someone else pretended wasn't there. The chain link hummed in the crosswind. The guard with the off-brand badge watched us like a mall cop at Christmas and didn't say anything, because the TRO had taught him how to read a piece of paper with consequences at the first corner, west point of the island. Miles swept slow with the magnetometer. The locator chattered, then went flat, then squealed like a fork on glass. "Hard signal," he said. The rodman cut the sod with a tile spade and peeled it back. 2 inches under the duff, a circle of rusty orange showed. They dug down with their hands and a brush like archaeologists at a dig. Steel, rebar crown. 30 inches of granite kissing the bottom of the bar. Miles set the rod over it and called the shot "rod on iron," then clicked the rover. ".1," he said. He held the controller up next to Earl's pencil scribble. "Within 600ths," he added, like a man admiring craft and not quite believing he gets to catalogue it. We walked the island, North Point, East Point, South, each one with Hemlock's iron asleep in granite, like a truth that never needed an audience. The magnetometer found them. The rod stood on them. The rover spit numbers within an inch of Earl's hand. They ribboned the witness stakes, set a few fresh rebar caps with their license number, where the old ones were too deep to leave exposed, and shot the cabin corners. The kid rattled off coordinates and mileage with the speed of someone who could run a marathon in decimals. Miles made a quick sketch on a write-in-the-rain pad and boxed the difference between where cabins sat and where the line ran. "All 23 structures are inside your parcel," he said, casual like he was asking for a screwdriver. "Not just inside, deep inside, front steps to back decks." "Sign it," I said. It took them 2 days to reduce the field notes, draft the plat, and make it ugly in that beautiful way engineers do. No flourishes, just a thick black line around my island and red footprints where cabins stood. They stamped it with a raised seal and a state registration number, because that's what a finished survey has in this state. The kid snapped a photo of me holding the plat. "Looks like a mugshot for a man who likes maps," he said. "Guilty," I said. Before noon, I had Miles's sworn affidavit, licensed surveyor, state registration number, coordinates matched to historic control, iron pins located, improvements plotted, and a line that would matter in court. All structures labelled Cabin 1 through Cabin 23 are located wholly within the parcel legally described as Lawson Island. We were past fog. This was steel and coordinates versus binders with fonts. While the survey ran, the other machine kept moving. Not their machine, mine, DNR and the Corps returned for a joint site visit. No cameras, no speeches. They parked in the same gravel and walked the same stretch of riprap as the first day, except this time the Corps man had a folder with a project case number printed in the top right corner, and DNR had a copy of the TRO clipped behind his forms. They paced off the causeway, OHWL to OHWL, ordinary high water line, measured fill width, and wrote 40410 in neat blue in a box labelled jurisdiction, after the fact. "Permit or removal," the Corps guy said to no one in particular. "Septic and setback violations." Don't get permits after the fact, the county health man said, more to the wind than to Karen, who hovered at the edge of the scene, scribbling on a legal pad like note-taking, could make the orange stickers look less orange. Titles and plats aside, agencies talk to gravity and hydrology. Their math doesn't care whether you paid a management company to send a newsletter about progress. By then, the construction lender had sent its letter, funding suspended pending cure of title defects and regulatory holds. Contractors with their names on equipment trailers read that line once and went home. The HOA tried to patch the hole with a temporary dues adjustment, special assessment by email. You can always spot the moment a board starts thinking in other people's money. The subject line gets softer. The numbers go up. Temporary becomes vocabulary instead of description. Owners fought in comment threads with a heat that comes from seeing a number you can't pay and a mistake you can't admit you made when you voted nobody in and let them spend like the bill would go to somebody else. More than one wrote me privately, "We didn't know. Will there be a way to..." I wrote back one sentence. "There will be a way to stay." I meant it, but not for the people who treated a deed like a suggestion. High Plains Titles Coverage Council called Kate and didn't waste her time. "We are in a hole," he said. "We'd prefer to discuss resolution before the bad faith letters start flying." "Your client wrote policies on a chain with a forged link," Kate said. "You'll fund the fix. We'll keep families in their beds. We'll take the folks who got rich and use them to fund the rest." He didn't argue with the nouns. He asked to meet after the first hearing. He wanted to see which way Patterson leaned. That's not cowardice. That's survival. Title companies are allergic to precedent. Karen switched tactics. When rage and newsletters didn't work, she tried humility on camera. "A sad misunderstanding. We followed counsel. We will appeal any overreach," she told the local paper in a bland room that made you want to move out of town. The reporter asked for the state plat registration number. She said technical filing sequence. The reporter printed the words, "No record exists," from the state's clerk, because even in 2024 a small paper in a small county sometimes still does its job. At the end of the TRO's 10 days, we were ready to stop talking about who should stop moving and start talking about who owned what. You don't go to a quiet title hearing with feelings. You go with a stack you can carry in one hand that can knock a table over if you drop it. We filed the quiet title petition that morning and served it the right way. HOA, developer, anyone who had recorded a claim that thought a binder and a smile could beat a seal and a deck of survey points. My stack had 5 things I wanted Patterson to see without squinting. Certified copy of the 1952 deed, recorder's raised seal. County tax roll receipts and parcel map, 31 years, clean. State certification that no plat annexing the island had been recorded. No record found in caps. Miles's certified GPS survey with license seal and state registration number. Photos of Hemlock's iron at each corner. Coordinates within 600ths of Earl's. 1950s notes or DNR Corp's letters of jurisdiction and the county health notice tagging, shore land and septic. And because Kate is the kind of lawyer who hangs pictures on the wall of her head until she can find the screws, we had one more. A simple, short affidavit from my bank showing my mortgage required me to maintain insurance, and the HOA's liability notice to my insurer had spooked my carrier into cancelling. In my state, that's what the TRO was for, keeping the status quo so men didn't lose houses while other men tried to move lines with newsletters and backhoes. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like wax and coffee. Patterson is the kind of judge who gives you an hour when he says you get an hour and expects you to act like you read your own papers. He took the bench with his glasses low and the patience of a man who raised teenagers and remembered both ends of a county meeting. "Mr. Rains, Ms. Hollis, he said. He nodded at the other table. Miss Hensley, counsel. Kate stood first because she always does. Your Honour, we're seeking to quiet title to Lawson Island in Mr. Rains' name and to enjoin further work. The certified 1952 deed is in evidence. The county tax rolls show 31 years of payment. The state's survey and platting office confirms no recorded plat annexing the island to the HOA exists. Our licensed surveyor located Hemlock's original iron corner pins and produced a certified GPS survey showing all 23 cabins located entirely within Mr. Rains' parcel. DNR and the US Army Corps assert jurisdiction and have issued stop work notices for causeway fill and shoreland septic violations. The TRO stopped occupancy and marketing. Patterson looked at the certified deed first. He always starts with the oldest piece of paper. He ran a thumb over the raised seal like a man who understands what it costs to press one. He flipped the tax stub stack with his pinky. Thip, thip, thip. He looked at the state certification with the no record found line. He looked at the survey like any man who ever split fence rails and got a blister he was proud of. Hemlock was a stickler, he said, unexpected humour cutting the room. I see his iron in the photos, and your coordinates match his notes within 1/10 of a foot. Kate nodded. He slid the DNR core letters off the pile. Read the jurisdiction lines, 404 to 10, and the shoreland reference. Folded them like a man who doesn't need to hear the speech those letters always produce, and turned to the other table. He asked exactly one question. Counsel, he said, quiet enough that everyone leaned. Do you have a recorded plat annexing the island to your subdivision in the state registry? The HOA's lawyer stood, pulled a binder everyone in the room recognized, and tried to smile with just his lips. We have a county filing, he started. Patterson shook his head once. Do you have a recorded state plat? He asked again, as if the words had a weight he could make you hold. The lawyer looked at Karen, who stared at the front of his binder like the answer might be printed on the inside of the cover and she just hadn't read far enough. No, Your Honour, he said finally. We do not. You could feel the room reset, like a boat that had been listing all morning, decide it would rather float. Karen's mouth opened and closed once without sound. Someone in the second row, George maybe, exhaled tight. Patterson set the papers down and tapped one finger on the corner of the survey. Good, he said, because then we can stop talking about fantasies and start talking about fixtures. He slid his glasses up his nose, and in that tiny motion, you could feel the floor get solid in a way that has nothing to do with concrete. The judge asked one question that turned the room. A. Quiet. Title, Judge Patterson. Ran a courtroom like a man who'd spent enough Saturdays fixing fences to know when he was being asked to admire a crooked post. He took the bench at 9 a.m., looked down at the two tables and said, I've read your papers. Keep your voices low and your sentences short. Kate stood. Your Honour, this is a quiet title action. We seek an order declaring Lawson Island owned by Mr. Rains, enjoining any occupancy or advertising, and recognizing that the structures presently on the island are attached to his land. She didn't do theatre. She handed the clerk one stack, 5 documents. We'd built like a bridge, certified. Copy of the 1952 warranty deed with the recorder's raised seal. County tax rolls. 31 years of paid. Receipts. With a parcel map shaded Lawson Island, state survey and platting certification. No record found for any plat annexing the island to Maple Shores. Licensed surveyor's affidavit plus certified GPS survey, state registration number, photos of Hemlock's rebar, coordinates matching the 1950s, notes within 600ths, DNR and US Army Corps letters asserting jurisdiction over the causeway fill and shoreland septic violations. Patterson worked top to bottom. He ran his thumb over the deed seal like a man who understands the difference between a copy and a certified copy. Flipped the tax stubs. Thip, thip, thip. Read the state "no record found" line twice. And lingered on the survey long enough to point at the photos of iron. Hemlock was a stickler, he said, not looking up. Kate. So we hear, Your Honor. He set the DNR core letters aside without ceremony. Jurisdiction noted. We're not trying their case today. He turned to the HOA's table. Counsel the state registry. Do you have a recorded plat annexing the island to your subdivision? The HOA lawyer stood with a binder everyone in the room had learned to dread and then stopped bringing. We have a county filing, approved last October. Soil reports, environmental impact. Do you, Patterson said again, quieter and harder, have a recorded state plat? Silence, then the thing that matters. No, Your Honor. Patterson didn't nod. He didn't need to. He put the survey back on top, set the deed on it like a keystone, and spoke for the record and the room. Title to Lawson Island is quieted in Mr. Rains. Maple Shores' updated plat is not a transfer of land. It is paper never made real in the state registry. And the county's permits do not relocate title. He looked at us, then at them. This is not a debate. It's an index. You could feel the air let out of 100 lungs at once. You could hear pen scratches as two reporters tried to catch up to the part of the morning that mattered. Patterson could have stopped. He didn't. He leaned back, set his glasses on the bench, and said 6 words that landed like a level hitting true. Fixtures follow the land. They're Lawson's. 4B, fixtures, trust, and enforcement. It took a beat for the sentence to register. Fixtures follow the land. They're Lawson's. 23 cabins built on my island weren't Maple Shores amenities. They were improvements attached to my dirt. In law, fixtures aren't romance. They're gravity. The HOA lawyer tried to climb a hill already passed. Your Honor, with respect, families invested. This is not eviction, Patterson said, holding up a hand. This is status. The court declares Mr. Rains holds possessory title to improvements affixed to his land until settlement. No unit may be advertised, occupied, or transferred without his written consent. He flipped a page. Now, misuse. He slid the receiver's interim report into the light. DNR core notices. Special assessment talk while title was in dispute. Emails about pushing through technicalities. An insurance cancellation triggered by the HOA's liability concerns. This board collected dues for an unlawful expansion, attempted a special assessment to defend it, and ignored regulatory authority it didn't like. The court, 1, expands the temporary restraining order. No occupancy, no rentals, no advertising, no additional site work. 2, enjoins any special assessment. 3, appoints a limited receiver to oversee HOA accounts for 90 days. And 4, sets a settlement framework conference with a special master. He looked straight at the HOA president. Mrs. Hensley, you personally signed letters to insurers and vendors while concealing the title defect and promising amenities on land, not yours. The receiver's report shows related party disbursements and personal benefit. He let personal benefit hang in the panelled room like smoke. The court imposes a constructive trust on Mrs. Hensley's personal residence and any non-exempt equity for the benefit of a restitution fund. She will not profit from her wrong. The sheriff will post a writ of assistance within 7 days. She will have 30 to vacate. Her lawyer started proportionality. Patterson tapped his pen once and moved on. Orders to recorder. Record this quiet title judgment in the island's chain. Annotate Maple Shores filings as non-conveyancers lacking state registration. And cross-reference this order with the Ellis pendens, which remains pending until settlement execution. He looked at me and Kate because he'd done this enough to know the next part only works if the man with the leverage says the right thing. "This is how we will do the decent thing," Patterson said. "Owners will be offered two options. A. Purchase the ground at a discounted price, funded mostly by title insurance claims. Or B. Take a 99-year ground lease, inheritable and transferable, at fair rent, with seniors and veterans at $1. This court will not allow the lie to end in new cruelty." He looked at both tables like a father reminding quarrelling neighbours where the road ends. "Work with the special master. Do not go on television. Sheriff enforces this order at the Causeway. DNR and the Corps will do what their statutes tell them. Next hearing in 30 days. Bang! It wasn't a bang. It was a gavel kiss. It felt like a keystone. In the hall the sound came back. Reporters moved like schools of fish. Someone shoved a mic toward me. I kept walking. "The orders are public," I said. "Read them." Kate put a hand on my shoulder, like you do for a man who can swing a hammer, but shouldn't be allowed near a camera. Marlene, polished, brave, empty, made it 3 steps from the door before the sheriff's civil deputy handed her the writ. "Writ of assistance, constructive trust," the deputy said, voice like gravel, steady as a plumb bob. "Posted today, 30 days. "You can't take my house," Karen said, screaming the way people do when they don't know where to put their hands. "I'm not taking it," the deputy said. "The court is." The clerk at the recorder's office stamped the judgment at 11:37 a.m. A new line appeared in the index. "Order quieting title, Lawson." Another line cross-referenced the lis pendens to the quiet title. If you pulled the parcel 2 hours later, the map shaded my island as it had in every century except the last 7 months of someone else's story. By afternoon, the Title Insurers Coverage Council, called Kate without any throat clearing, were prepared to fund discounted lot purchases and a settlement administrator, he said. "We'll need a per lot schedule and an appraisal protocol." "And the seniors and vets?" Kate asked. $1 ground leases, he said. We saw the judge's face. DNR and the Corps posted a joint notice after the fact permit required for the causeway or removal, shoreland remediation required, septic redesign and setbacks per county health. It was written in the kind of English that works in any decade. Fix it or lose it. The management company fired off one last "we will appeal" email that sounded like hope pushed through a shredder. Owners didn't answer. They were busy calling banks for lot loans the title insurer had already promised to grease. They were busy reading a 2-page letter the special master posted that began, "You can stay," and ended, "Bring your questions and a photo ID." The sheriff's office went to the causeway at sunset with a copy of the order and a deputy who'd had a day, but still kept his hat level. He read the line about no gate or barricade and stood to the side while a county truck pulled the chain link back like you roll up bad carpet. The aluminum private access sign clanged against the gravel and made a noise I didn't know how much I wanted to hear until it sang in the wind. I stood on my side and watched the gap open like a throat letting air in after a held breath. The water under the causeway moved the same way it always had. Gravity doesn't read orders. It likes being told it's in charge. Neighbours went home that night and slept better, not because their lives were fixed, because somebody had drawn the line that means everything in counties like ours, the one that matches the paper to the dirt. At breakfast the next morning, George knocked for the first time since he'd whispered apologies through chain link. He had 2 coffees and 2 scared boys trying to look like they weren't looking. "You won," he said. "The paper won," I said. "Now we do the decent part. What does that look like?" he asked. 2 options at folding tables in a gym, I said. "And people with clipboards who say you can stay without flinching." He nodded. "I'll help carry tables," he said, relief turning the corners of his mouth up in a way that made me forgive him for a lot. The phone rang twice while we talked. First, the bank. Our lot loan program is live. Title insurer committing 70 to 85%. We'll pre-qual folks at the gym. Second, the special master. Roads and utilities, bylaws ready. No fines, budgets online. 3-person board. 20-minute meetings. I made a sandwich and ate it over the sink because rituals don't change just because paper did. Then I went down to the shore and looked across to my island. 23 cabins, all fixtures, all of them about to stop being weapons and start being homes because a judge spoke 6 words and meant them. Fixtures follow the land. They're Lawsons. You could hear wind in the pines. If you were quiet long enough, you could hear iron talk. End of part 4. Ready for part 5. We'll move to the settlement days. Insurer-funded discounted lot buys. 99-year ground leases. $1 seniors.vets. DNR core compliance. Dissolving the HOA. Standing up the bare-bones roads and utilities group. And the first batch of owners signing and exhaling. We didn't do it in a courtroom. We did it in a high school gym on a Tuesday with folding tables and a sign-in sheet. The special master put 3 tables down the center line. Bank, title insurer, closings, and a 4th off to the side, leases. He hung 2 printer signs that did more to control panic than any speech I've ever heard. You can stay, bring photo. ID people came in with arms folded and mouths tight. They left with paper that meant something. The insurer's lead coverage counsel sat at table 1 with a spreadsheet and authority. Discounted lot buy. He said like a man who had learned not to use adjectives around checks. Our contribution ranges 70 to 85% based on appraisal. You cover the balance. We fund wiring to escrow same day. The bank had pre-approvals ready. They weren't selling dreams. They were writing lot loans with numbers that didn't choke people. 5-year prepay forgiven. No balloon silliness. Rate locks long enough to get folks through remediation. The closing table was a notary, a stack of docu-signs and a clerk with 3 colored tabs. Sign here, initial here, date here. It was boring in the right way. Owners signed deeds for dirt their cabins had been sitting on for 6 months like squatters in good paint. We recorded the lot deed, recorded a 1-page release of my possessory claim on the improvement, and printed a receipt that said, done. Not everybody could buy dirt right now. Table 4 was where the air really changed. 9-year ground lease, the special master told a retired couple with hands that shook when they tried to keep their pride from sweating. Transferable, inheritable, CPI cap at 2%, no back rent. Year 1 waived. For you two, $1. The old man laughed once and covered his face. Their daughter squeezed my arm so hard I felt my bicep the next day. I didn't say anything. I don't have words for moments that do their own work. I nodded and watched the notary stamp paper that meant those 2 would sleep without looking at the ceiling counting what they could sell. We built a restitution trust to keep it going. The title insurer funded it first. The constructive trust sale of Karen's house funded it second. 2 vendors the receiver caught. Expedite fees that were never paid to the city and landscaping money that went to a brother-in-law. Funded it third after they met their lawyers and made their deals. The trust paid closing costs for low-income owners, funded survey, recording fees, and covered the receivership. The gym days became their own rhythm. Seniors first, then young families who had believed the glossy flyer and now wanted to believe something that didn't change when wind hit a sign. A few holdouts tried billboard lawyering. They folded when the special master pointed at Patterson's order and the bank's letterhead. We recorded in batches, so the recorder's staff didn't have to live on pizza and war stories. By Friday evening, 29 lot deeds and 16 leases were on the index. By the following Wednesday, we were past 50. The land thief signs disappeared from lawns the way a fever goes when the medicine's right. While paper moved, the waterwork didn't wait. DNR and the Corps don't slow down for good feelings. The causeway got an after-the-fact permit on paper with conditions that would make a sloppy job cry. We cut 2 sections and installed culverts big enough to make the hydrology stop cussing. We pulled back the illegal fill, armoured with riprap where the Corps said, and planted willow and sedge in a toe that made the shoreline look like it had always wanted to be this way. County Environmental nixed every septic trench inside the setback and told us where to put real ones. We drilled wells on pads with permits, hanging in plastic sleeves that crinkled in the breeze the first day and then settled into background the way a fire extinguisher hangs where it needs to be without making speeches. We remediated the spot where a contractor had buried spoils too close to water. We took pictures, stamped permits, and filed everything in a binder fat and ugly. That kind of binder wins. It has registration numbers and latitude, longitude, and signatures that don't smudge. I hired my own crews. I paid them net 30 and didn't ask them to look the other way about anything. We brought every cabin to code: stairs, rails, smoke, CO, egress, GFCI, the stuff you list on a carpentry pad and a county form. I stapled the inspection cards to the frames where they belong. Nothing fancy, just done. The Title Insurers Council came back for mediation day 2 with a per-lot schedule and a checkbook. He laid out an appraisal protocol that didn't insult anyone's intelligence and agreed to a 95% contribution for seniors who wanted to buy dirt. The special masters smiled at him like a teacher catching a child doing the right thing before the bell. We signed the global settlement and filed it. Patterson blessed it in open court with a nod that said, "Now act like adults." And then we killed the thing that did the damage. The HOA dissolved without a funeral. The receiver filed the petition. The judge signed the order. The Secretary of State changed the status from active to dissolved in grey text. Nobody refreshes on purpose. The management company returned a thumb drive and a box of keys. The last newsletter's MailChimp subscription died with a credit card that wasn't theirs to use anymore. We stood up something. Simple in its place because roads freeze and pipes clog and somebody has to plough and answer the phone. Lake Roads and Utilities Association, 3 pages long, went to record with a limited purpose. Maintain and plough access roads. Keep the lift station maintained. Publish a transparent budget quarterly. No fines. No architectural committee. No approved paint colours. The only notice it sends is, "Your tree fell across the road. Please move it." We picked 3 board members by drawing from names at the gym, 2 who did PTA too often, and an engineer who forgot that calculus is voluntary in small towns. The first meeting was 20 minutes in the library, and the agenda fit on a half sheet. Snow route. Lift station service contract, 500s for Culvert Rock. They posted the budget online as a PDF with numbers you could see without squinting. No one shouted. One guy asked if he could plant oaks along his street. Folks said yes and asked if anyone had a tree spade. When the constructive trust sale of Karen's house closed, the deputy posted the writ, and nobody smiled. Not even me. The broker sent the check to the restitution trust. The special master published a ledger with line items like a church bulletin. In, insurer, trust sale, clawbacks, out, closings, survey fees, remediation grants. The comments section that afternoon looked different. It read, "Thank you more than anything else." A week later, the aluminum private access sign disappeared from the causeway. The county crew that came to haul it away asked if they could give it to the shop guy to hang over the bench as a joke. I said yes. Nobody misses those signs when they're gone. The cabins started to look like homes. Lights came on at dusk like polite neighbours. In the morning, a little kid dragged a tackle box across a porch and tried to carry 3 rods at once. His mum shouted, "Don't run with hooks," and he didn't listen, because 5 years old means you're always bounding towards water. George showed up on a Saturday with 2 boys and a bed of 2x6s. He scratched the back of his neck like a man who hadn't done enough and knew it. "You still need a dock," he said. We brought hands. Other neighbours came. We cut joists and burned forearms on galvanized hangers and stayed until the lake turned orange and somebody cracked a cooler. We built a dock that felt like it had always wanted to be there. It wasn't Helen's dock. It was the one that came after, and that's the job when you can't go back. At the end of the second week of closings, the special master stood in the gym and read numbers that didn't lie. Lots bought at discount with insurer money covering most. 3 ground leases recorded, including 9 at $1. In process with letters of commitment. HOA dissolved. Roads and utilities online. DNR core compliance in progress. Inspection cards signed off cabin by cabin. A reporter asked for a quote. I gave one sentence and walked away because talking longer turns truth into argument. This wasn't eviction. It was correction. People stayed because paper gave them away. That night, the first plough route map went up on the new roads site with a note in plain English. First pass at 4:30 a.m. Please don't park in turnouts. Salt fund balance, 1 of 1840 tone. People donated enough by afternoon to cover 2 saltings. No fines were needed, just a map and a sentence. The last thing we did before the sign went up was the small, mean work you have to do even when you don't want to. We took down the HOA's monument at the entrance. It took 20 minutes to unbolt a lie. The post holes filled themselves with rain. The next morning, the special master emailed, "Your phrase for the sign?" I sent 4 words, because you don't need more when you mean them. Respect the lake. Stay. The Corps signed off first. DNR followed with a short letter that mattered more than its length. Remediation satisfied. Shoreland stable. Causeway culverts flowing the way the lake meant them to. County Environmental stamped the last septic. Card and left the tag hanging inside a weatherproof sleeve like a quiet promise. We put the sign in the ground on a Saturday morning with a borrowed auger and 2 bags of set mix. Cedar. Hand-routed by a friend with patient wrists and a shop that smells like sawdust and radio static. The letters were simple and deep enough that rain couldn't erase them. Rain's Island, preserve, respect the lake, stay. Nobody gave a speech. Somebody handed me the driver to seat the last lag and I took it because ends should feel like something in your hands. A kid asked if he could be the first to touch the sign. His mum said yes, and he laid his whole palm on the cedar, like he was swearing an oath he didn't have words for yet. The first roads and utilities meeting after the gym days lasted 19 minutes. 3 items, plough route map posted. First pass 4:30 a.m. Don't park in turnouts. Lift station service contract renewed. Budget line $1,900 per quarter. Salt fund balance $2,614 after donations. Thank you, neighbours, no fines. No violation letters. A guy asked if we could set a community workday to pull buckthorn on the shoreline. Board said sure. Bring gloves. Everyone left with a date and an email address, and without a single form telling them what colour their patio furniture needed to be. The last TV van came once more, then left when it didn't find anyone willing to scream into a microphone. The HOA's old email list bounced. The management company changed their phone number. The receiver filed his final report and went home to a wife who probably didn't let him talk about work. The special master returned to fishing and sent me a note that said only, "Good neighbours, good paper." I kept it because it didn't try too hard. We set the scholarship in Helen's name with the community foundation because I didn't want a ceremony. I wanted checks that clear. 2 awards a year, $5,000 each. Preference for kids headed into ag, water, roads, or the kind of law that keeps those 3 honest. The counsellor at the high school sent a photo of the first 2 standing between a bookshelf and a trophy case. One wants to engineer culverts that don't fail, and the other wants to write county codes that make sense. I printed the email and stuck it on the fridge under the same magnet that once held a trespass notice. Better paper. My daughter Dana came over the night the first lease renewal letter went out with the word "confirmed" in bold at the top. She didn't start with, "I'm sorry I told you to quit." She handed me a six-pack and said, "You were right to be patient." I didn't need the words. I needed the way she said them. Sergeant Hale stopped by the causeway on a different Saturday, leaned his elbows on the railing we'd bolted on because we were done pretending the drop didn't matter, and looked over at the cabins with a quiet, "You only hear after a county settles. Lot of folks slept last night," he said. "Better than they did 6 months ago," I said. He nodded at the sign. "That's the rightful words." We built a dock that felt like intention. George and his boys came back with a bed full of 2x and a box of deckmate screws. Other neighbours brought a cooler and a palm sander and stories about docks they'd fallen off of when they were my daughter's age. We set string lines and drove stainless through wet grain and let the lake rock new nails into old water. When the last board landed, we sat and let the light run itself out. On the morning the first snow stayed, the plough came early and clean. The bus made the turn without chewing a rut into the shoulder. Nobody wrote a notice. Somebody posted a picture of the first pass with the caption, "Thank you," and the board replied, "You paid for it. We just called a truck." At 48 minutes into the story, if you're watching this instead of living it, I'll ask for something plain. If this helped you breathe easier, hit like. Tell me your state and the pettiest HOA fine or letter you've seen. Subscribe to HOA Busted and ring the bell. New long-form justice every week. Quiet wins don't go viral by themselves. You have to push the button. 2 minutes for the last part. I took the certified GPS survey and the deed back to Sue at the recorder's window the next week and asked her to make me a second set. "You gonna frame these yet?" she said. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll keep them where I kept the first ones." Bottom drawer under the recipes. Paper belongs where hands live. At dusk, the cabins looked like homes. A kid in a red jacket dragged a sled down a porch and stopped short at the causeway to check for cars the way someone taught him. His father waved at me from across the water. I waved back and meant it. The orange stickers were gone. The only bright squares now were from windows. People ask if I regret not tearing the cabins down. I don't. Engineers don't destroy sound structure if it can be made right and used well. The court didn't give me trophies. It gave me responsibility, so we did the decent thing. Fixed the water, legalized the dirt, kept families in their beds, and made the ones who lied pay for it. On the last warm afternoon before the next cold thing, I walked to the new sign with a wrench and checked the lags. Still tight. The wind moved the cedar smell around like a reminder you can't put in a folder. They called it theirs. Paper said otherwise. Iron agreed. Neighbours learned the 3 most important sentences a county can hear. You can stay. The road is ploughed. Respect the lake. It's early now. Coffee. Mist. The dock cuffing the shore in 4-inch waves. I hear a kid laugh across the water at a joke you could only hear if you were sitting where I am, right where the old dock was and the new one is. I think about Helen and the way she'd tap a nail head flat and say, "There," like the job could rest because we did what the day asked. We did what this day asked. And if you want more days like this, if you want the next man with a deed and a problem to find a way through, tap. Like so this story finds him. Drop your state so I know where these fights are. Subscribe to HOA Busted. Keep your receipts. Respect the lake. Stay.